I've been so busy since I came back to Moose Factory. I've done Pre-Fest and Goop, and I never had a chance to write my speech. So I did it last night, and I worked till 4 o'clock this morning doing it. And it's a good thing I don't need beauty sleep. It is a hard thing to write. For somebody who didn't know how to start, it ended up being 7 pages, so you have to bear with me. My name is Penny Turner. I am a graduate from the Mental Health and Addictions Worker Program at Canada College in North Bay. And it is by the grace of God that I am standing here today. A few years ago, I came across these words from Mother Teresa. Life is an opportunity, benefit from it. Life is beauty, admire it. Life is bliss, taste it. Life is a dream, realize it. Life is a challenge, meet it. Life is duty, complete it. Life is a game, play it. Life is a promise, fulfill it. Life is sorrow, overcome it. Life is a song, sing it. Life is a struggle, accept it. Life is a tragedy, confront it. Life is an adventure, dare it. Life is luck, make it. Life is too precious, do not destroy it. Life is life, fight for it. And fight I did. In 2007, I had to fight for my life when I was diagnosed with an illness that could become terminal if not treated fast and aggressively. It was a shock for me to hear the news of my diagnosis, and the only thing I could think about was my children and my 2 precious grandsons. How would they handle this if they were to lose me? I had so much to live for, and I wasn't ready to give in so easily to my disease, so fight I did. The next few months were difficult ones, but with the love and support of my family, my extended family members, my friends, and genuine support from members of my community, I was able to fight, and slowly I was winning the battle. In early 2008, I started to think about the past months, and I felt that I had been given a second chance at life. My life had become too routine, and I was not happy with my career anymore. I shared my feelings with my close friend Virginia, and her words to me, "Why don't you come live with me in North Bay and go to school?" I thought about what she had said and pondered with that thought for a couple of months before I took her up on her offer. So in March of 2008, while still on chemotherapy, I made a bold move and left to go to North Bay. I left on my own to set myself up with the college and do the necessary things I had to do, and then in the summer, I came back to Moose Factory to get my son and daughter. September 2nd of 2008, I walked into Canada College after being out of school for 27 years and started my first day of the Indigenous Wellness and Addictions Prevention Program. Needless to say, I was a little bit intimidated and nervous about being there after seeing all the other students who were the same age as my children. That was the only time I ever doubted myself about being there, but that was only short-lived because I said to myself, I have just as much right to be here as they do, even if I am a goo-goo. So my stride became more confident from that day on. The first year was exciting for me, but it was also very tough. It was around this time that our communities were struggling with suicide among our youth. In January of 2009, we lost a member of our extended family to suicide. My son had been very close with this family member, and it became very hard for him to comprehend, let alone accept this loss. And because he didn't know how to deal with the death of his friend and cousin, he too became suicidal and had threatened on various occasions. During this time, it was only my son and I who were in North Bay, and it became very rough on me. I still went to school daily, but the thoughts that were in my mind were, did he do anything? What am I going to find when I get home? while trying to listen to my professors at the same time. So I made it a habit to call out his name when I walked in the door and didn't stop calling until I heard him reply. Then I could breathe a sigh of relief. His suicidal ideations and threats became too much for me to handle. I started to call the police to assist me because he would take off from our home when he was in this state. I was lucky to have a compassionate officer who was willing to help my son, because the third time I called for help, he told me he was going to get him the help that he needed. My son was admitted to the North Bay Psychiatric Hospital, and it was a hard thing for me to do, but it was the best thing that could have happened for him. Because being in there, he received some great psychiatric counseling, and he was able to deal with the death of our cousin, his friend, Thomas. All this happened between January to April, and in May, I still managed to finish my first year with a GPA of 4.0. My second year came rather quickly, but this time I was ready to face those hallways. The third semester was tougher. The workload was more intense and more demanding. We continued to struggle with losses in our family, and in November, we returned to North Bay after attending yet another family funeral. The next day, November 2nd, I returned to school, and it was about 10:30 that morning when my brother called me and asked me if I finished writing my test. I had 2 scheduled for that day and was on break after writing the first one when he called. He told me he was coming to pick me up, and I could tell by the tone of his voice that something was up. I thought to myself, oh no, now what? I still remember that day when he came to the college, him getting out of the van, and my sister-in-law following behind him. He pulled me into his arms and said, Pete P. passed away. He had the hard task of being the one to tell me that my daughter Meryl had died. My older sons happened to be in the South at that time and were able to join Shelby and me in North Bay. My other daughter was on the train returning to Moosonee with my parents, my sister and her husband. My older sons broke down when they saw me and collapsed to the floor with grief. As a mother, it was the hardest thing that I had to witness, to see grown men fall like that. I felt I had to be strong for them and for my other children. We made the long trip home to bury my daughter. After the funeral, we only stayed in Moose Factory for a day or two after, because I had to return to school to attend a mandatory workshop for one of our classes. If we failed to attend this workshop, it would mean failure of the program and my second year. So I returned to class that following week. I was lucky to have such a great group of peers in my program, because when I returned, they presented me with a card signed by all of my classmates. I opened the envelope, and by then I couldn't even read the card. My eyes were already filled with tears. I bawled like a baby, and so did my classmates. With this in mind, and knowing what I had to get done, my mind went right back to my studies, and I think that year I just functioned. I threw myself into my schoolwork because, as I had said, it was a demanding and very intense. Of course, there were days when the pain hit and I'd cry, but then I'd wipe my tears and get right back to it. In May of 2010, I graduated and received my diploma in the Indigenous Wellness and Addictions Prevention Worker Program. That summer, my son and I returned to Moose Factory because I had summer employment with Moose Cree Health Services. Addictions are everywhere, and it certainly was no stranger in my home either. It had become an issue within my family. My children struggled with their own addictions, and choices they made weren't always good ones, which only caused more trouble for them. I worried constantly, more especially with my 2 younger ones. I am so glad that I made the choice 6 years ago to stop abusing alcohol, or I would not be able to find my strength to go through what I have been through with my children. Tough love is rough, but I had to practice it in my 3rd year of college. September 2010, my son and I returned to North Bay, and I entered my third year to obtain a second diploma in the Mental Health and Addictions Worker Program. The education and newfound knowledge that I received the previous 2 years in college made me realize that I am a person. Yes, I was a mother, a grandmother, but more importantly, I am a human being, not a human doing. I realized that my children were adults now and growing. I could not keep them home as much as I'd like to. So when my son said he didn't want to stay in North Bay anymore and wanted to go to Moosonee and live with his father, with great reluctance, I let him go. After he left, I started my 5th semester and was excited about starting the new program. I had a hard time getting into the program, but still went daily. I thought it was because of my children and the worries that I had for them. My son struggled with his addiction and liked the freedom that he had of being on his own. But with his newfound freedom came problems. He started to have trouble listening to rules and eventually moved out of his father's home. This became his pattern. Moved from one place to another, and he still didn't want to come back to North Bay. Eventually, his addiction got the best of him, and it caused him to get into trouble with the law. His home from January to June of this year would be the Monteith Correctional Facility. My daughter had been struggling with her own issues and had her own addictions for many years. She too struggled with suicidal ideations and actually attempted on numerous occasions. In December of 2010, she became very ill and was medevaced from Moose Factory to Kingston. I went to be with her, and it was soon discovered that she had a form of meningitis. She was hospitalized for over 3 weeks, and once she became well enough, we traveled to North Bay on Christmas Day. We had no tree or presents that year, but we were thankful for her health. By this time, I missed all of December's classes. I had kept in touch with my school counselor, who had notified my program advisor of my situation. I was very lucky again to have understanding professors who allowed me to write my exams when I returned and to catch up on my assignments at my own pace. My daughter returned to Moosonee before New Year's, and as soon as she left, I went right into my studies and started studying for exams. By this time, my brain had turned to mush. I was so sure it was due to my struggles with my children. I felt as if I had not learned or didn't absorb anything the whole semester. I studied, but it didn't sink in. I couldn't concentrate on anything. At the same time I was in North Bay, I still continued to see a specialist for my condition. In February, during one of my follow-up appointments with him, he told me that my last couple of lab work showed that my kidney condition had flared up again and that he wanted to start chemotherapy and steroid treatment as soon as possible. Those were not the words that I wanted to hear, and I just sat there and cried and cried. I left the doctor's office and went home. I called my parents, and as soon as I heard my mother's voice, I broke down and cried again. My cry was that of a mournful cry, and it scared her. She handed the phone over to my dad, and I was still crying. I guess she figured with all the hardship I had with my kids, she figured something happened to one of them. Once I was able to tell them that what was happening, and my mother, who knew what I'd have to go through again, told me they were coming to North Bay the next day to be with me and support me through the treatment. True to their word, they were in North Bay with me, and I started treatment the next day. It all made sense to me after a while, because one of my symptoms to my condition is that I would lose concentration. Once I started my therapy and was on my medication regularly, my mind became sharper, and I was able to finish all my exams, all 10 of them, and all my exams in the prescribed amount of time. My parents watched me as I sat up many nights to catch up and have assignments in for the next day, and to have to repeat it the very next night. If it had not been for their support and the motivational words that I got from them and from my brothers and sisters and my own children, I would not be standing here before you. During my last year of college, I had so many people tell me that I am a strong person, a strong woman, who has been through so many struggles during my 3 years while in school. They wonder how it is that I never quit. Quit? What's that mean? There were days when I wanted to give up, sure, but quit? No way. I was on that last stretch, and damn it, I was gonna make it. It was with my own determination and motivation